Hey guys, I wanted to give you guys an update on the Nancy Guthrie investigation. I know there's been some information going around.
Before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss future true crime investigations. Every case we cover involves real people, real families, and real consequences. Our goal is to examine the facts, the unanswered questions, and the events that continue to shape these stories. Now let's begin. Disclaimer: this documentary is based on publicly available information. Some details discussed involve allegations, and individuals mentioned are considered innocent unless proven guilty in a court of law. On a quiet night in Tucson, Arizona, an 84-year-old woman disappeared from her home. Her name was Nancy Guthrie. To many people, Nancy was known as the mother of Savannah Guthrie, the well-known television journalist and host of NBC's Today Show. But behind the public attention was something much more personal. Nancy was a mother, a grandmother, a loved family member. And when she vanished, her family was suddenly forced into a nightmare that no one should ever experience. The pain of losing someone is difficult enough. But when someone disappears, there is another kind of suffering: the uncertainty. Not knowing where they are, not knowing what happened, not knowing whether the next phone call will bring answers or more questions. As investigators worked to understand what happened to Nancy Guthrie, the case took an even more disturbing turn. Someone allegedly inserted themselves into the investigation and attempted to exploit the family's desperate search for answers. That person was Derek Colella, a California man who would later face charges connected to fake ransom communications involving the Guthrie family. But how did the case reach that point, and why did the plea agreement that followed create so much discussion? This is the story of the Nancy Guthrie disappearance, the ransom messages that shocked the public, and the questions that remain unanswered. Nancy Guthrie was living in Tucson, Arizona when she disappeared. According to reports, concerns grew after family members were unable to reach her and discovered circumstances that suggested something was wrong. For the Guthrie family, the situation quickly became every family's worst fear. An elderly loved one was missing. Every hour mattered. Every possibility had to be considered. And while investigators searched for information, Nancy's family was left facing the most painful part of any disappearance: the unknown. Savannah Guthrie later spoke about how difficult the uncertainty was, describing the pain of not knowing what happened to her mother as one of the hardest parts of the situation. For families of missing people, the absence of answers can become its own form of suffering. There is no closure, no final explanation, only questions. And then during this already devastating time, investigators became aware of messages that would add another disturbing layer to the case. According to reports, members of Nancy Guthrie's family received messages from someone claiming to have information connected to the disappearance. The messages involved demands for cryptocurrency. One message reportedly asked, "Do you have the Bitcoin?" The sender allegedly continued communicating with the family regarding the transaction. There was also reportedly a brief phone call made to one of the family members. For a family desperately searching for answers, these messages created even more confusion and distress. A disappearance is already an emotional crisis, but the idea that someone could use that pain as an opportunity for financial gain created outrage among many people following the case. Investigators eventually connected these communications to Derek Colella, a man from Hawthorne, California. Colella later faced charges related to the alleged fake ransom communications. The case then shifted from only being about a missing woman to also being about an alleged attempt to manipulate a grieving family. As investigators traced the source of the messages, attention turned to a man from Hawthorne, California. His name was Derek Colella. According to prosecutors, Colella was responsible for sending messages to members of Nancy Guthrie's family that falsely suggested he had information about her disappearance while requesting Bitcoin payments. The allegations immediately drew widespread condemnation. For many people following the case, this wasn't simply an internet scam. It was viewed as someone allegedly taking advantage of a family experiencing one of the worst moments of their lives. The messages reportedly targeted Annie Guthrie and Tommaso Tioni. Publicly available court documents and reporting indicate that these were the family members contacted during the alleged scheme. Many observers found that detail particularly troubling. Rather than sending random messages online, the communications were allegedly directed toward people personally connected to Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. For the family, every message had the potential to be meaningful. Every phone call carried the possibility of new information. And that is exactly why false communications in missing person cases can be so damaging. Families desperately searching for answers often have no choice but to take every lead seriously until investigators determine otherwise. As news of the case spread, one question kept appearing in discussions surrounding the investigation. If someone allegedly tried to profit from a grieving family's tragedy, why didn't the punishment seem more severe? That question became even louder after details of the plea agreement became public. Many people expected a lengthy prison sentence. Instead, the reported agreement called for 5 years of probation along with substance abuse treatment and rehabilitation, rather than immediate prison time. Whether someone agreed or disagreed with that outcome, it became one of the most debated aspects of the case. To understand why so many people reacted strongly, it's important to understand what a plea agreement actually is. In criminal cases, prosecutors and defense attorneys sometimes negotiate an agreement before a trial takes place. The defendant agrees to plead guilty to certain charges. In return, prosecutors may recommend a reduced sentence or dismiss other charges. Supporters of plea agreements argue that they save time, reduce the uncertainty of a trial, and guarantee some level of accountability. Critics argue that in certain cases the agreed-upon punishment may not reflect the emotional impact experienced by victims. The Derek Colella case quickly became part of that larger conversation. Many people believed that attempting to exploit a family searching for a missing loved one deserved a much harsher punishment. Others pointed out that plea agreements are often influenced by legal considerations that are not immediately obvious to the public. Without knowing every detail considered by prosecutors, it can be difficult to understand why a particular agreement was reached. Even so, the reported sentence surprised many observers. The announcement of the plea agreement was met with disappointment across many online communities following the case. People who had closely watched developments expected a stronger legal response. Instead, many described the outcome as surprisingly lenient. Some questioned whether probation alone sent the right message in cases involving alleged ransom hoaxes connected to missing person investigations. Others worried about the broader implications. If someone is accused of exploiting a family's fear during an active missing person case, should the consequences be severe enough to discourage similar conduct in the future? It is a question without an easy answer. The criminal justice system often balances punishment, rehabilitation, available evidence, and legal standards. Public expectations, however, do not always align with the outcome reached in court. Regardless of legal debates, one fact remained unchanged. Nancy Guthrie was still missing. The legal proceedings involving Derek Colella did not answer the central mystery. They did not explain what happened to Nancy. They did not provide closure for her family. Instead, they became another chapter in an already painful story. For families of missing persons, every false lead consumes time, energy, and hope. Investigators must determine whether new information is genuine. Family members are forced to relive their trauma every time another supposed clue appears. Even when a lead turns out to be false, the emotional damage has already been done. That reality is one reason why cases involving false ransom demands often generate such strong public reactions. The harm extends far beyond money. It affects trust, it affects hope, and it affects families already living through unimaginable uncertainty. Even after the plea agreement, the case continued to raise difficult questions. Was the punishment proportionate to the alleged conduct? Did it adequately recognize the emotional impact on the Guthrie family? And perhaps most importantly, what happened to Nancy Guthrie? While the legal case involving Derek Colella addressed the alleged fake ransom communications, it did not solve the disappearance itself. That mystery remains at the heart of the story. As long as Nancy's fate remains unknown, the case continues to leave investigators, her family, and the public searching for answers. By the time news of the plea agreement spread, many people had shifted their attention away from one question and toward another. Not just what happened in court, but what does this case tell us about crimes involving families of missing persons? When a loved one disappears, families are often willing to follow every possible lead. They answer unfamiliar phone calls, they read every message, they investigate every tip. They do so because they cannot afford to ignore even the smallest possibility that it might bring them closer to the person they love. Unfortunately, investigators have long warned that criminals sometimes exploit exactly that desperation. False sightings, fake witnesses, bogus ransom demands, hoaxes designed to extract money, attention, or simply create chaos. Each false lead carries a cost, not only in investigative resources but in emotional suffering for families already living through unimaginable uncertainty. In the Nancy Guthrie case, the alleged fake ransom communications became a reminder of just how vulnerable families can be during an active missing person investigation. Although the legal proceedings involving Derek Colella attracted significant attention, they were never the central mystery. The real mystery has always been Nancy Guthrie's disappearance. An elderly woman vanished from her own home. Her family has continued searching for answers. Investigators have continued pursuing leads. Yet the question that started this case remains unanswered. What happened to Nancy Guthrie? Until that question is answered, every new development becomes just one piece of a much larger puzzle. Part of the reason this case attracted national attention is because it combined two deeply emotional stories. The first was the disappearance of an elderly woman. The second was the allegation that someone attempted to exploit that tragedy for personal gain. Even people who rarely follow true crime found themselves discussing the case. Many imagined how they would react if their own family received messages claiming to have information about a missing loved one. Would they ignore them? Would they hope they were real? Or would they feel forced to respond because the possibility, however small, was simply too important to dismiss? Those are impossible choices that no family should ever have to make. Cases like Nancy Guthrie's also serve as an important reminder. Law enforcement agencies routinely advise families to verify any information they receive through investigators. Scammers often take advantage of high-profile missing person cases by pretending to possess inside knowledge. While some are motivated by money, others seek attention or simply want to insert themselves into an unfolding investigation. Regardless of the motive, false information can distract investigators and deepen the pain experienced by families. That is why authorities encourage the public to report credible information directly to law enforcement, rather than spreading rumors or engaging with suspicious claims. As of today, the legal proceedings involving the alleged ransom messages represent only one chapter in a much larger story. The most important questions remain unanswered. Where is Nancy Guthrie? What happened the night she disappeared? Will investigators eventually uncover the truth? Those are the answers her family continues to seek. And until they are found, the case remains open in the minds of everyone following it. The disappearance of Nancy Guthrie reminds us that behind every headline is a family living through uncertainty. A missing person investigation is not simply another news story. It is days of waiting, weeks of hoping, months of unanswered questions. When false information enters that process, it doesn't just complicate an investigation, it affects real people whose lives have already been turned upside down. Whether you followed this case from the beginning or are hearing about it for the first time, one thing is certain: the search for the truth is not over. And until the truth is known, Nancy Guthrie's disappearance remains one of the most heartbreaking, unanswered questions in recent memory. If you found this documentary informative, consider subscribing to the channel for more in-depth true crime investigations based on publicly available facts and court records. If you have thoughts about this case, share them respectfully in the comments below. Thoughtful discussions can help keep attention on cases that continue to affect real families. And if this video helped you better understand the events surrounding Nancy Guthrie's disappearance, please leave a like. It helps more people discover stories that deserve to be remembered. Thank you for watching. Stay safe, stay informed, and we'll see you in the next investigation.